What's up, gamers? We got to talk about the Path of Exile economy. For people who play solo self-found, hardcore solo self-found, this probably doesn't mean anything to you, but for the other 99.9% of people who actually play Path of Exile, this is some pretty interesting stuff. Now, I've not been playing this league as much. I don't really find it very fun, and there's not a lot of cool build ideas that I've got or anything like that, so I just really don't have very much to do. However, I have been an observer here, and the show has been filled with drama essentially since day one. Now, lots of things have happened. The economy has kind of shifted. There's been issues with like the frog problem where people were printing divines in maps and it was causing all kinds of chaos that they fixed. And we have our next problem here realistically, where some solo players are capable of generating 10 mirrors in a single day. Solo players. That is an absolutely absurd amount of currency. And there's a lot to talk about when it comes to that. However, also in this video, we're going to be talking about Ubers versus Pinnacle bosses and some of the unfortunate consequences of tying the entrance fee to Ubers to map content. And if you enjoy these kinds of videos or they end up helping you out, make sure to give this video a like. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos. Without further ado, let's talk about the PoE economy, or what's going to be left of it. So if you're not aware, I said this in a video that came out before the league, that there was probably going to be a really strong strategy revolving around divination cards, and being able to assign certain favored maps with divination cards and get more divination cards, and also them be the best ones from all the different areas. Immediately when I saw the scarabs, this is the one that popped out to me. However, I never in my wildest dreams expected that it would get this bad. This one scarab is worth 40 divine. One of them is worth 40 divine, and it's used up at the start of the map, and yet people are making bank with it. Now, if you're not aware of what this strategy is, this is essentially the tree that Fubgun linked. He's the guy who got 10 mirrors in one day. And essentially how it goes is that you're using this Divination Scarab of Curation, you're assigning a bunch of maps. There is a spreadsheet that shows you exactly which maps are the best to put into here. It's all been mathed out. And then on top of that, you're using this Divination Scarab of Completion. This makes it so that when you drop a Divination card, you have a 20% chance for it to just drop as a full stack. And then of course, you've got 150% increased divination cards found in areas. This is just a good scarab. And then the new juice that people have been doing in the last day or so is that unique monsters slain in the area create 8 to 12 additional beyond portals. The reason that this is broken is because of this All Flame Ember of Anarchy. What it says is that pack is composed of rogue exiles. So you take these, you put it on every single pack in the entire map, and it just floods the zone with more monsters than probably even like the original Beyond used to. This is essentially the exact same thing that was happening. You remember when people used to do big crazy Beyond maps and the game would just lag to a halt? This is the same thing, and arguably it's worse. Now, if you're interested in how this strategy works, 99.9% of you are not going to be able to do it, just so you're aware. I've linked Fubgun's video down below in the description. Definitely an interesting video if you're curious to see like the inner workings of it. But realistically, you can't afford it. Like, the starting price to have a character that is even capable of doing it is hundreds of divines. And then on top of that, the entrance fee for every single map is like 50 plus divines for one. So if you're made of money, you probably already know about this strategy. But let's talk a little bit about why this is a problem. Now, the first problem realistically here is that right now, no other strategies can come even close to this. It's not even in the same universe of power. And if this strategy isn't adjusted in some way, the people who are capable of doing this right now, their profits and their currency is going to skyrocket, while the currency and profits of everyone else is going to shrink in comparison. But the issue here is that already builds that are capable of doing this have had the prices of their gear skyrocket. So it's more difficult to get a build that's capable of handling these kinds of maps. They are not easy. You need an extremely overpowered character with probably at least a headhunter most of the time to be able to even start these maps. Because keep in mind, we're talking hundreds of rogue exiles. You're respawning them with like ritual as well as strong boxes and all of those are causing there to be tormented spirits that are going out. So we're talking about tormented, spirited, rogue exiles, hundreds of them that are all spawning extra beyond mobs. It's absurdity. You need a NASA computer, a build worth a mirror, and enough currency liquid to be able to even farm this consistently. It is an absolute catastrophe, but it's pretty beautiful watching everything burn down in real time and just seeing the insanity of all of this. Now, how do you fix this? And if you're wanting to make some money off of it, how do you make money off of it? Realistically, I haven't even put in a section about how you make money off of it, because I'll be honest, if you already don't have money, you can't. And there's nothing realistically that you can do. You can still farm as you would anything else, it's perfectly fine. And don't get me wrong, you can still make plenty of money with very low investment. Like, for example, I haven't had a ton of time to play, which is why you're not seeing a lot of videos for me. I haven't really enjoyed the league, and I've had a bunch of other pressing stuff going on, but I've been playing a little bit, right? And I've just been doing like an 8 mod map farming strategy where you just farm like 8 mod Crimson Temples, and you do like some ambush scarabs and some corrupted map scarabs and more maps found. You run ambush on it, and the whole goal of it is to just farm general currency, but also farm a bunch of these Crimson Temples. You sell them to people in bulk on TFT, and I've been making pretty good currency with that. So don't get me wrong, you can still make plenty of currency with builds that aren't insanely expensive. Like, I have not spent that much money on my build in general. I'm probably 20, maybe 25 divines in or something like that, maybe a little bit more depending on how much the prices of stuff are going up right now in certain cases. But it's not oppressive levels of money where one item for the build is 50 divine to start or more. And unfortunately, for a lot of these builds that are using these kinds of scarabs, like for example, we can take a look at something like the Fulcrum and the Chieftain here. The Fulcrum itself is like 5 divine even to begin with, but a lot of these builds, because of how difficult those maps are, they also require amulets like Defiance of Destiny, which is now 52 divine to even begin. On the other hand, however, Headhunter is only 27 divine right now, and Mage Blood is down to 122 divine because of just the sheer amount of these items that are being pumped into the economy right now. It's honestly pretty insane what's been going on in the last couple of days. I didn't think that I would see the day where Defiance of Destiny was worth more than Headhunter, but it is what it is. Now, as for fixing this, realistically, I think the best way to do this is to massively reduce the power of the Allflame and the Scarab. We're talking about, in particular, the Allflame Ember of Anarchy, where it says pack is composed of Rogue Exiles. This should probably just be like, has an added rogue exile or two with them at best. It shouldn't be composed of rogue exiles. And then as for the Scarab, honestly, I just think this either needs to be deleted, reworked, or reduced in power by probably a factor of 10. However, I also think that if you reduce this in power by a factor of 10, it should also drop like 10 times more frequently. I have played a decent amount of farming, like more than the average player would, even with me only playing casually right now. And I have found 0 of this Scarab, and I have found 1 of this Scarab. And I have particularly just been farming Scarabs the entire time that the league's been out. That is all that I've found. I've found 30 to 40 of almost every single other Scarab. These are more rare than most of the horned scarabs, which are supposed to be the most rare scarabs. It's genuinely kind of disgusting how rare they are. So realistically, the solution here in the forefront of my mind is reduce the power significantly while increasing the availability by probably about the same amount that you reduce it. Means that more people are able to do the strategy, which should balance things out a little bit, and you don't get this insane power of dropping literal entire stacks of like Headhunters and Mage Bloods and 19 Mirror Shards in just one stack, and it happening multiple times per day. It's honestly just kind of broken, and it needs to be fixed. But if you're interested in this, like I said, go check out Fubgun's video down below. Now, the next big problem here with the economy is what's going on with pinnacle bosses and uber bosses. Now, I have said that splitting up the entrance cost for pinnacles and uber bosses has been something that they've needed to do for a long time. However, they did something beyond what I expected, which initially I thought was pretty good, but in reality has turned out to be a little rough. And that is that they have put the entrance fee for uber bosses inside mapping content. So if you're not aware of what's been going on with uber bosses and such, the way that this works now is that instead of dropping full entrance keys and you taking a keystone on the atlas to be able to enter the boss fight, now you're required to get these reality fragments or devouring fragments or uber boss fragments that drop from the bosses of tier 17 maps. The problem here is that they drop 1 to 2 splinters at a time, and you need 5 of them to do an uber boss. Now, you might think, well, you get, 1 or 2 fragments per map, how bad could it be? Well, tier 17 maps ended up being absurdly difficult. And if we jump into game here real quick and we take a look at one of these, I'll go ahead and identify it. It has a bunch of insanely dangerous modifiers here. And the only way to modify these maps is with a Chaos Orb. You actually can't modify them in any other way. So you can only re-roll them to be these disgustingly difficult maps that have some of the most insane modifiers I've ever seen. And this leads to a situation where, in my opinion, most of the tier 17 maps are substantially harder than uber bosses. And this goes against even what GGG's goal for these were. These were meant to be kind of a stepping stone in between pinnacles and ubers. These are just harder, in my opinion, almost always. And on top of that, tier 17 maps are also the premier location for high-end farming and magic finding. So the maps end up being worth quite a bit, especially some of these up here at the top, meaning 60, 70, 80 chaos per map and more if you're trying to buy them in bulk. So this entrance fee means that you need to make a lot of money out of the map. And to be able to make a lot of money out of the map, you need to be juicing this map really well. And to be able to handle a juiced tier 17 map with all kinds of crazy stuff on it, you need an insane build. All of these prices add up and make it so that vast majority of people are not able to make any profits off of these maps unless they're playing an insane build with insane gear while juicing it as hard as they possibly can. So it leads to this just massive barrier to entry, which means not that many people are doing them, which means that there's just simply not that many uber fragments that are going to be in the economy. So what this has led to is to some pretty disgusting prices on some of these. Now, a few of these have actually kind of tanked in price a little bit because there's just not really that much that's worth farming from these ubers. And the tier 17 maps that do get farmed more end up having more of these drop. However, the ones that don't, or the ones that are very valuable, have absolutely skyrocketed in price. So as you can see here, the buying price for these, 244, the selling price, 374. So realistically, it's somewhere in the middle most of the time, right? So we're talking 300 chaos for one reality fragment. You times that by 5 and you get 1500 chaos for a single Uber Maven entrance fee. Now, if we go take a look at currency real quick, you'll see that divines are 163 chaos, right? So if we bring up a handy dandy calculator here and we do 1500 divided by 163, you'll see that it's currently 9.2 divine every single time you want to fight the Uber Maven. And what has this resulted in? Well, if we go and take a look at unique flask prices, you'll see that Progenesis is currently 98 divines. And essentially, anything that drops from Uber Maven is going to be absurdly expensive, such as the Grace of the Goddess, I think is like 7 or 9 divines or something, and there's like 3 people using this one in total, as well as access to impossible escapes. The more difficult ones are kind of, much lower than normal. It's just overall a pretty rough situation. To give you an idea, the Maven's Writ in last league, in Affliction League, capped out at 730-ish chaos for one. And that was at the peak, roughly a month into the league when the divine shenanigans had gone basically as far as they possibly could. Right now, it's worth over double that. So alongside this, there's been some questionable decisions, in my opinion, about where to put certain boss uniques, and it's led to some interesting prices. If we go back to this flask section here, you might notice that Dying Sun is 7 divine. That's pretty insane, if I'm gonna be honest with you. Typically, this flask goes down to 100, maybe 200 chaos at most, but it's going up currently. And it's going up pretty quickly. Now, this flask is used on a lot of the builds that you do these giant high-end maps for, so it's very high in demand. However, the problem is that it drops off of normal shaper, and it has a very small chance to drop off of normal shaper. And on top of this, none of the other items that normal shaper drops are worth anything. So all of your money that you're going to be getting from normal shaper are going to be a fragment of knowledge or a fragment of shape. Sometimes you'll get some of these, and then the Dying Sun. Those are the only items that make money money off of normal Shaper. And people already didn't like running Shaper or Uber Shaper before, but now that you have to run Uber Shaper and it doesn't drop Dying Sun, that means that this item has just skyrocketed in price. So it's much more difficult to obtain now, because a lot of the big money from Shaper was always from this Sublime Vision, which is now Uber only, meaning that the supply of these, not so good anymore. So if an item is heavily desired and also very low % chance to drop, and it's on a normal pinnacle boss, chances are the cost of that item has skyrocketed. Now, is there potential for you to make money off of this? Absolutely. Now, you can always go in and find something where Dying Sun is worth a ton, and maybe the entrance fee is pretty low. You can adjust to this and find some little crevices in the economy where you can still eke out some pretty good profits. But as long as this divination card farming strategy is working how it's working, it's gonna be pretty rough to make even somewhat decent amounts of currency with anything else, just because of how much money this is pumping out. Now, how do we fix this? In my mind, I think the problem is with T17s themselves. I don't think the problem is anywhere else. GGG massively missed the mark on difficulty here, and T17s just need to not be so oppressively difficult. They said they wanted them to be in between pinnacle bosses and Uber bosses, and I'll tell you, I fought some pinnacle bosses this league, and in comparison to Ubers, pinnacle bosses are so easy. It's insane how easy they are. I fought Shaper, normal Shaper, for the first time in probably 2 or 3 leagues now, and it was astonishing how slow the slam animation was, to the point where I was like, what is this fight? This is so simple in comparison to Uber. In T17s, if I put like pinnacle bosses here and Uber bosses here in difficulty, a lot of the time tier 17s are like here in difficulty. It's simply just not balanced very well. Now, I think most of this realistically comes from how these maps are being rolled and how rolling it works. It shouldn't be this special thing where tier 17 maps are only rollable in a certain way. I think that's kind of silly, if I'm going to be honest with you. They should be able to be rolled like anything else, and the adjustment in rewards from the maps should be able to be rolled like anything else. So if you run a tier 17 map as white, which you should be able to do, it should drop you very, very little rewards, like maybe 1 Uber fragment at most. And if you're running it like 150 quantity on the map, then you should probably get a whole set of Uber fragments from the map. This is the way that it's worked with Maven invitations forever, and that worked perfectly fine. If the system exists and isn't broken, there's not really a huge reason to change it if that system is working. I have hopes that GGG will be proactive and fix both of these issues, because I do think that it is not good for the game in general to have Uber bosses essentially unobtainable and unfightable most of the time. They should definitely be obtainable, and pinnacle bosses are. I think that that's a win. I do think that pinnacle bosses are significantly more fightable and obtainable, and it makes more sense to be able to fight them. But Uber bosses are now simply too far away. And T17s are simply way too difficult, and we really just need to be able to roll them normally. So hopefully we see some fixes. I really hope this is a mid-league fix, because if not, a league that already has, in my opinion, kind of got some dwindling appeal is probably just going to fall off really quickly, and that's always kind of sad. So hopefully we get some pretty big fixes here sometime in the next day or two. So remember, boys, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.